Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Writers Chat. We're so glad to have you with us, whether you're here today with us live or you're watching the recording. Today's kind of a very special Writers Chat. One of my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh, and I are going to be talking about the recent novels marketing conference that Thomas Umstattd Jr. hosted in Austin, Texas. We were there a couple weeks ago. I'm also joined by Brandy Brow, another one of our wonderful co-hosts, and surprise guest, Kathy Brasby from Colorado. She also was at the Writers Conference and popped in today, and we put her on the spot and said, why don't you just stay on and help us talk about the conference and our experiences there. So real quick background, Kathy and I connected before the conference because we were both looking for rides from the airport to the hotel. And she and I connected, and a wonderful gentleman named John picked us both up, and we went out to dinner with him, and it was just such a fun time. And then so we knew Kathy and we're talking to her at different times, and her and Melissa really connected, and Melissa got to spend the night with her on the way home to Wyoming from Texas. So they got to spend some extra quality time together. And Melissa also had with her her daughter Morgan, which was really fun. Like Melissa and I have known each other a long time, but this was the first time we met in person. And of course, we've seen Morgan as she's walked past the camera at different times and growing up. And, so it was really fun to meet her too. So we're just going to talk about some of the highlights of the novel marketing conference. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat again, and we'll get to those. So here we go. I guess I was going to start off by saying, telling you a little bit about how it was structured, because it was different than a lot of conferences that you go to. There were no 15-minute appointments to attend, nothing like that, though there were people such as Tracy Higley, who's an award-winning author, Tricia Goyer, who's an award-winning author, best-selling author, and a couple other gentlemen who, like Evan Gao, is he with Story Origin?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So that's a program to help writers. So he's very invested in making this program really helpful and in talking to writers and getting them involved in using his program. So what they did was we had tables set up with 4 people to a table, and there were different rows of that. And so 2 tables were kind of connected, the table in front of you or the table behind you. And they were divided into groups. So Melissa, what group were you in?
I was in the Charles Dickens group, which was predominantly historical fiction, although we had some fun little fantasy historical fiction mixes in too, and a little conglomeration. And yeah, it was fun to see even the names that they broke us up into. Everything was kind of as close as they could, separated by genre and also the author's personal experience, how many books published or how long they've been writing. They kind of judged people based on their websites and their content and where they were at in their specific writing journey, I think. And that also helped influence which groups each attendee was broken into. And so the whole idea of it was to present topics on marketing and things like that. And then after we learn lessons, then we would be separated into our groups to apply the things that we learned and work one-on-one with each other.
It was really fun. Kathy, what group are you in?
I was in the John Milton group, and I am not sure why. Most of them were writing nonfiction Bible studies. It was a great group, and I enjoyed them. There was a couple. I write fiction. There was a couple of fiction writers in there, including the one man who is just finishing up a biblical allegory, and then he's experimenting, seeing if he can write Christian horror. So
Oh,
we had an interesting cross section of people in our group.
oh, that's fun. So
Yeah.
my group was called the James L. Rubart group. So you all know Jim. We've had Jim on here before, and he's kind of like a marketing guru, right? And eh, I'm not sure what our group was about. I think we were told it had something to do with platform, but I'm not sure I'm not even sure about that because I know my platform's not that great. But it was a mishmash. So I think it was like if you didn't really belong in another group, they just sort of put you in this one. We had a gal who's writing and I'm hoping to get her on here, in fact, on Writers Chat at some point, who writes, her project is getting how screenwriters can adapt their screenplays to novels. And she's very good at writing pitches and helping people develop pitches for their screenwriting. She's worked in LA before for a long time. And then I don't know, everybody was just different. Somebody's doing this environmental thing about it's a children's story about the groundhog. I don't know, Puxatawny, Phil, did I get that right?
Phil.
But it's involved, but there's environmental lessons and so forth. So that was interesting. And a guy that was writing, he and his twin brother have a company in Israel called Twin Tour Guides. And he's wanting to write about, especially Westerners, seeing Jesus as an Easterner and kind of combining the Western mind thoughts with the Eastern mind, and so he was very fascinating. And we had a guy from England. So anyway, it was just really cool. And then there were other groups like the Tolkien group, C.S. Lewis group. What else was there? Oh gosh, ladies, you remember anything else? Jane Austen. There was a Jane Austen group.
Yeah, there was. I fixated on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis just because, favorite authors up there. Fantasy people, had to connect with all of them too.
Yeah.
And what were you about to say, Brandy?
I was wondering, it kind of sounds like this is big, but I kind of remember you saying that they were keeping this small. But how many people attended?
I don't know, probably around 100, I would guess.
Okay, so it's a little bigger than I thought, but not like
Yeah.
the super huge conferences.
No.
Okay.
And so there were 8 people in each group, and I'm not sure how many groups there were. I'm sure there were at least 10. So then you're talking about, 88 people maybe. And then there were like coaches and other and conference, his conference staff and that kind of thing. So we did everything together. I mean, we did, the presentations were all to that room. Like Melissa said, we would break up, and we had to practice introducing each other, like we'd talk to each other and learn what we could about the other person and then introduce that person to our group. And then, so every time, since I did that with this one gal who was amazing, her parents are from Nigeria and she's married to a Viking and lives in Iceland. I mean, just amazing people. And she's writing contemporary fiction. So we introduced we talked first, and then I introduced her to the group. She introduced me to the group as her new best friend. That's what we were supposed to say. This is my new best friend. And then, so the next time we did an exercise, I didn't do it with her. You had to do it with someone else in the group so that you were very much interacting with everybody in your group and the group as a whole. So that was really cool too. Okay, so just to get into a little bit, of course, it was a lot of marketing. It was, as Thomas started out with, a very, inspirational kind of talk about, why do you write? Why is it important to you? And sort of like, when you know the why, then you can know the what, and talked about that. And then we did get into some marketing things. So one thing I wanted to talk about that I thought was interesting that he presented was identifying our marketing assets and liabilities, because things that I wouldn't even have thought of as assets were things that he was giving as an example. Like having a computer that works is an asset. Having a smartphone is an asset. I mean, so it's not just, I don't know. That was just good. It was good to see, oh, that gives you a start thing. I'm not just in here hopeless in this writing world, which can be so daunting. Writers Chat is an asset because we are a community and we can help each other, and we do help each other. I mean, it's impossible for all of us to help all of us all the time, but there are little groups, and I see it. I see people supporting each other, as they best can. And that's really wonderful. And what were some other assets? What were some assets, Melissa, Kathy, do you remember that you thought of as you were creating your lists?
Well, I was just thinking I could probably flip to that and see my notes if I come to it. Because my brain just, the courage to push the button. That was one of the big ones there. Overcoming your technological inhibitions. I mean, like Johnnie said, you come to a conference like that and you're expecting to learn all the big things, because you've got that wrong mindset in your head, like, oh, I've got to learn how to do Amazon ads and Kickstarters and be able to get thousands of people on my newsletter list so that I can be this bestseller. You've got all these high, lofty ideals that have been basically crammed down your throats through online and other, teachers, gurus, name the gamut. And so you come at something like this really intimidated, thinking, what do I have to offer? What can I do? I'm only here and everybody else is up there. And I liked that he brought it down to earth for us, that we could look at it and say, hey, I actually do have something to offer, something I had never even considered. It was like, I'm good at writing it off for myself, but a lot of people don't have is, I have 22 years of experience researching fiction craft as well as my topic for my historical fiction. And so I have a skill set, understanding how to write fiction and how to really understand big picture stuff, and that I can use to assist other authors. And I never even considered that as something that was a benefit, or, I consider myself a person who has a lot of technological inhibitions, but I still have come a long way compared to where I was, and God has used that to help me help others. And that causes us to be able to network with other people. And as y'all know, those network connections are what really progress us as authors in the industry, and open doors for us. One person you may not suspect could be that individual who just opens your eyes to everything and basically paves the path for you to where God wants you to be in your writing. And you learned really quickly at this conference not to forsake the little things, and to really get a better perspective of where you're at and what you have to offer as an author.
Yeah, that's great. So while we're talking, why don't you guys, if you've got like an asset that you might not have thought of as an asset before, as we're talking, put that in the chat, and that would be fun to see too. Kathy, do you have anything to add to that?
I think because Thomas is very technological, he focused a fair amount on that. Things like the website. He said, even if you have a fairly recent smartphone, that's an asset for you to use. If you have a YouTube channel, I'm just looking here too. Do you have a website? I assume most or all of us do. A reliable laptop. I'm just looking at some of the stuff I put down here. Speaking opportunities, but I felt like that networking at the conference, that was my number one reason to go, was to network with other people. I think as authors, we can get caught up in, what's the term I want to say? But we, like you were saying, Melissa, we're not sure we're as good as anybody else. And everybody thinks that. Almost everybody that's there thinks that. And we find out that maybe I'm good at this, they're good at that. That's part of where the networking comes in, I think. And so I appreciated the opportunities that Thomas gave us to network, like you were talking about, to introduce our new best friend, so to speak. I don't know if you'll talk about that pitching exercise later. That was really, really valuable too. So just some of the assets that we overlook sometimes are incredibly valuable.
Yeah, they really, really are. I like what's I'm a great cheerleader. That's so true and so needed. The 540 writers community, that is a wonderful community to be involved in. Other conferences, other like ACFW, Word Weavers, those are all just, they can be assets, and they are networking assets as well, as Kathy was talking about. And I want to just follow up with that, because then we all ate breakfast and lunch together too. And most of us were staying in either one of two hotels that were right there in the same area, within walking distance of where the conference was held. So a lot of people, went out to eat dinner at night together. So, or you could sit in the lobby and you'd see people. So it was just wonderful that way as well, that we could do that. And of course, then there's also marketing liabilities, and just, just facing the truth of what those might be. One thing I put down was fear. I'm always afraid of making the wrong decision, so that's kind of a liability, followed up by lack of confidence and know-how. But those all kind of go together for me. It's like I want to do it, but I want to do it right, and I'm not sure, so I don't do it at all. It's sort of, I don't know if that's an oldest child tendency. Sometimes I think it might be. I've got that little oldest child curse. Um, he talked about negative self-talk, again, the technology, just having not a good relationship with technology. And like Kathy said, push the button. He told us that, just push the button and just try. Um, who else wants to admit to liability?
Oh gosh. I'm so good at focusing on liabilities. It's like, but yeah, some of the liabilities I had put on was obscurity, fear, debt, toxic relationships. Even those can hold you back in publishing if you connect with the wrong kind of people. Physical impediments. I know one of the things that I absolutely appreciate, like they mentioned earlier, the 540 Club. Sorry, there's so many writers that have, physical limitations and things that prevent them from going to conferences or inhibit them in some of their writing, and they feel like, oh, I can't attain this goal because of this limitation. Poor social skills for that networking. Oh gosh, my daughter had to laugh at me so much at this conference, and she prompted me. It was a good thing that she came. Here I am, the 40-something-year-old mom in the background, hanging by the wall, looking at people like, okay, who should I go talk to? I don't know who to talk to. Oh, I should talk to that person. Oh, now somebody's talking to them, so I don't want to interrupt their conversation. And my daughter is sitting over in what was considered the top of the world section for all of the extra attendees who weren't, writers. She's looking at me across the room with this look like, do I have to come over and grab your hand and lead you over to somebody to talk to? And I got this mental image, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be the mom whose daughter has to make her go talk to everybody. So I forced myself out there. But yeah, it's definitely something I consider a liability as an author, but yet I was also reminded through this exercise of listing our liabilities and our assets that sometimes our liabilities can become an asset because they help keep you humble and help you to press beyond your comfort zone. And so I did make myself connect with people, and it was fun to do so. I really just enjoyed that aspect of it. And yeah, it gave me a better perspective on myself. I think that yeah, if nothing else, that was one of the big takeaways, was the realization that even if I didn't come away with this fantastic marketing plan, that was okay, because I was grounded in this conference. I think that it really gave me a better perspective of where I am, and an easier road to where I need to be. Not easy as in easy to follow. It still has its challenges, but not so lofty, not unrealistic expectations, I think, is the better way to put it. I came in the conference thinking that I had all these tons of things that I needed to learn to get to the next step, that I was so far behind. There was just so much that I didn't know, and that I had to try to, swallow that fire hose of information. And when we got there and we started going through everything, I quickly realized, oh no, I just need to realize where I genuinely am, and what the next logical step is. Not this big, huge leap, but just one foot in front of the other, like we've often talked about on Writers Chat. And yeah, there were so many things that I didn't even know where to begin. I guess I could reference my notes, unless you have something else you want to talk about on that topic.
I'll come right back to you. What you were saying reminded me of Thomas's first talk, his opening keynote. And I went back to that note, and it was like, leave the easy road and take the hard road. It's like you're making a choice when you're going down the writing and you're really wanting to do it. You have to know it is a hard road, and you're going to have to face that reality. And he said, don't forsake fear, but do what needs to be done anyway. And that's such a key. It's like, yeah, the fear is there, but do it. And one other thing, then I'm going to go back to Kathy to see what she wants to add to this part of the discussion. He talked about Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, and how David or Goliath was built for up close combat because he was so big, and so he was so overbearing and intimidating, and he used very heavy weapons, and David turned those assets into liabilities, or Goliath's assets into liabilities. And so here's the quote. I think it's from the book itself. If all God gives you to battle giants is a few stones, then those stones are all you need to defeat giants. It's like, oh. Okay, Kathy, and then I'm going back to you, Melissa, to do what you want to do.
Okay, are we talking about the keynote or liabilities?
Either one, whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Well, one thing, I just went back and looked at my notes too on the keynote, and he actually asked us, and I've done this at other times, so I don't feel like I'm giving away any secret sauce of his, but he said, write down the most challenging projects you've taken on in your life.
Yes.
And it's a really great reminder that we have overcome some things. We have accomplished some things, and sometimes we gloss over those and think, I'm not nearly as good as some best-selling author or something. Well, yeah, we may never get there, but can we accomplish what God has given us to accomplish? Yeah. But let's see, let me look at liabilities, because some of the things that he mentioned are, where to go? Talked about, fear, negative self-talk. Those are some things that are liabilities that we can, if we recognize them, we can often make some strategies to say, no, I have overcome these things. I am not, totally worthless. I love this. He said, I'm just one Google search away from solving problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, buddy. In this day and age, exactly right. My youngest son used to work for customer service for a cell phone company, and they'd call up with their problems. And most of the time, the first thing he did was Google it. I thought, they could have done that too. And it's what he said. They could have done that too. But yeah, I think priorities is probably one that we all struggle with. How important is my writing to me? And we say it is, or is it just a hobby that we do kind of when it makes us feel good? Or is it something we really want to put some effort into and finish a book or finish the articles or whatever the current goal is? And that means sacrificing something else. And we have to prioritize our time. So that was a big reminder to me to just stay on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And I know a lot of you think a liability is that there are no other writers around you. I mean, we've talked about that because we encourage people to do in-person writing groups, and there's nobody. And Melissa lives out, middle of nowhere. I think Kathy also, she lives in a small farming community, and Brandy, and I know several of you do. So going back to community, this networking was so important because it just gave us a whole bunch of new people and to talk to and get to be friends with and connect with. Melissa, back to you.
Yeah, that perspective with others, that, hey, I'm not alone in this journey. There are other people in the exact same place, or maybe struggling a step behind, that I can help boost up, that we're there together to encourage one another in each of our individual writing journeys. And I think that really came to focus with the breakout sessions where we would work with each other in our groups, because not only were we having to really get sights on our book and our brand and trying to figure that out, but we also had to listen to other people and be advocates for them too with their work. The thing that really hit home for me was right in the second session, where he talked about building that irresistible author brand. And the thing that really kind of connected more with me, and I've heard it before, but I guess it just didn't really resonate with me until this conference, that your brand is your reputation. It's the story that other people tell about you. And when I got to contemplating that it's the story others tell about you, and how succinct you need to be with that. It also can kind of hit me that consequentially, it's the story others tell about your books, which are an extension of you and your brand. And so I got to thinking, what do you want other people to say about you in your books? What is that reputation that you want people to have when they think about you and your writing? And that was humbling to hear that and to think about that. And it really got the wheels turning about every single one that I've written and how it reflects me and my work and my mission. That was another thing too. And he got us thinking about our role models and what influences us in our writing. And that, you would think automatically you'd be tempted then, the whole, imposter syndrome and comparison trap. It almost looked like he was setting us up for it, talking about who your role model is, which best-selling authors would you compare yourself to? And I was like, oh, I don't even know if I want to go there, but he was forcing us, like, pick a best-selling author that you would compare yourself to. And then right after that, he said, how could you surpass your role models? And that was another one of those, oh, that's like, is this like a pride thing? Like, well, I could be better than. And then I got to thinking about it. No, the only way that I could ever surpass my role models is if I stay humble and keep learning. And that was exactly where I went with it. Here, my English is good. So yeah, that was the thing that really hit me, was the over and over again. He didn't discourage you from thinking about the lofty goals and the places where you want to be, but always brought you back down to earth reality, that having the right perspective, having a humble spirit, seeking to serve others is what's going to get you farther in marketing, in writing, in everything that you do in your writing platform. He really, really hammered on the reader focus. And that was something, I mean, if people have followed his podcast, then I'm not giving anything away by telling you that he emphasizes to find your Timothy. And if everybody is familiar with Timothy in the Bible, you know that Paul specifically ministered to Timothy in the book of Timothy. And he uses that as an example of honing in a message to serve a specific reader and knowing what that reader needs. And so that was one of the big focuses that I tried to think about more, was who is my Timothy? How can I serve this person? What do they read? What do they look for when they're trying to, find that next book that they just can't put down? Yeah. Oh, another thing that I really liked that he focused on, he just touched on, why people read in general. The general things that people are looking for in reading is education, entertainment, or escape. And that's something we've all heard before too. But the thing that I really loved, and I think that I've heard other people touch on this too. So again, this concept wasn't something new, but you automatically think both things are good until you really think about it. He said you can present your book as a vitamin or a painkiller. But in order to make it a painkiller, you need to understand your reader's pain points. And I thought, yeah, he used the typical example of Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin behind his booth, offering to give everybody a swift kick in the butt, for a buck. And that would be presenting your work as the vitamin. You know what people need, but are people really looking for the vitamin? No, not most of the time, no.
Well, that was all really good, Melissa. That was fun. And the whole escape, there were three. There was escape, entertainment, and education, right? Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I wasn't quite so there were nonfiction authors there too, even though this was a novel marketing conference. There were plenty of nonfiction people there. And so he was kind of addressing both groups as he went along in his presentations. One thing I found interesting, then I asked, can you talk a little bit more about the difference between escape and entertainment? What does that mean? And escape seems to me, if I understood it correctly, was more like thriller types, where you can't go to bed. You're just sitting there turning the pages, and you're really just into that gripping story. Where entertainment.
Actually,
Oh, do I have it backwards?
Not well, it can be for some readers, but my books serve escapism, so I can actually address that. And
Thank
he
you.
and others did. The big difference between entertainment and escapism: entertainment has got to keep pushing them in. It's got to have the action. It's got to have the going, the thrillers, the action, adventures, the high involvement fantasy, where the person can't put the book down. Escapism is like a world that they can immerse themselves in, that they never want to get away from, that they can feel comfortable in. It's helping them to get away from their present reality in the world. So even cozy mysteries, that's a great example of escapism, and they use that as an example. People are so, the world is such a dark place, and then you see all the hardships, and so to go to this nice cozy place where everything in the end is going to turn out right, that they're going to find the bad guy's going to be brought to justice, and things aren't going to be too crazy or scary along the way. That kind of genre serves the people that need that escape. They need that calm place where they know everything's going to be good. I got to thinking about my books, and my books are definitely escape into another world, but it also gives people a sense of belonging, of having a purpose, that they aren't abnormal, that what they experience, others experience, and they can have a purpose. And then of course to be able to escape into another world, another time, and to see what it would be like to be there. I think that a lot of people crave that, because life can be hard.
Yeah, I like the Amish. So Melissa's absolutely right. I had it switched in my head and looking at my notes. So there's a level of uncertainty. So there's and it's a continuum. So there's low is the escape, that's the intensity or uncertainty level. So it's relaxing, slower pace. And then the entertainment is that fast paced, higher tension, like mystery thriller, thriller suspense kind of stories. So, your books are going to fit somewhere on there. And then of course, education is more nonfiction altogether. Kathy, anything you want to add to this or to bring up that you really spoke to you at the conference, things that you learned about yourself or that you want to implement, or just?
Melissa, you did a great job of describing the difference between entertainment and escape. You really nailed that. So good for you. Because at the conference I thought, wait, I'm not sure if I quite get it. And I think I did get it, because escape books I put are often fantasy books, not necessarily, but it's that world. And I write a lot for my grandson, and he loves setting. He loves the world. And of course, guess what? He loves to read, especially fantasy, And so that idea of just settling in for 12 books in this world, is what escape is about. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. What else did you talk about here, Johnnie, that
you can take us on to something new if you want, if there's something we haven't even talked about yet that's very meaningful to you, or you found especially helpful, or
I don't know when you want to talk about pitching, but I found that incredibly helpful, and I didn't want to do it when he started. And he made us do it 5 different ways or something.
Yeah,
and
more than one.
more than one. But it was very helpful to me when I was trying to insert my story into it and realize, I need to work on this area some more. And again, I'm definitely an introvert as well, and it's real easy. I'm like Melissa, there's no really anybody around here that I can do much brainstorming with. So that was very helpful to get very helpful, not critiques. This was not a critique session at all. And, we're always scared to death. First thing they're going to do is tear apart every comma that's in the wrong place and all that kind of stuff. Wasn't that at all, but to be able to talk about concepts with these pitches. And that was incredibly helpful to me. I sat down after that session and just started writing like crazy, so I didn't forget some of the new ideas. Ideas were just popping. So that was incredibly helpul to me.
Yeah,
I love your realness about it. But you were afraid to do it.
Yeah, it was
I'm
good.
real.
We had to tell our story to, again, one other person in the group. So that I would, I told the guy named Lindsay my story. She told me about her project, And then we had to present to the group. So while Lindsay was telling about my story, I was not allowed to say a word and vice versa. Excuse me. Let me
Mhm,
cough a
mhm.
second. And to hear what all the stuff that I had thrown at her, because the story I was describing has a lot of elements, and how she just brought it down, you know,
Yeah,
because I think she only had like a minute to explain it, or I mean, there was a timer.
something like that.
So, you know, it was really an interesting exercise to hear how someone else took everything else that I had been spilling out to her and just kind of talked about it. And again, it was like, let me tell you about my new favorite book. So, you know, it was always very, very affirming that way,
Yeah.
and presenting that to the rest of the group. So, yeah, I was like Kathy. I had actually was using a story where I had part of the proposal done, so I had the back cover copy. I had the pitch. I thought, nope, not pitch so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really great exercise. Hard.
Well, and a lot of it also had to do with the other person pitching too. You really learned, he really kind of, that group breakout really hammered the whole, you need to be succinct. And it kind of emulated the internet and the overcrowded market really well in that regard, because your message needs to be narrowed down so much that it's easy for somebody else to relay. And not everybody can hone in on something and relay something very well. And, you know, I had considered that right off the bat when I was talking with one of the ladies in my group, and I thought that I gave her a very, very succinct thing. And then she started asking for more details, and pretty soon it got so convoluted that she wasn't quite sure how to present it afterwards. And I'm like, oh man, I should have just kept hammering on the simple. And I was like, but that really brought up a good point, and I learned so much from that. It's like, you know, I need to learn to be more succinct. I tend to convolute things, and having other people feed my weakness wasn't helping.
Well, if you have this huge book with all these characters, so many
Yes,
things happening, it is hard to
it
narrow
is.
it
It is
down.
extremely hard.
It's
But yeah,
hard.
it really kind of helped get me a perspective too, that I made the mistake of like doing summaries, you know, how we had to split everything up to try to pitch for different aspects of books. You know, I won't go into the specific details of all of the pitches, but some had to be pitches focused on like the setting of your book, or some had to be focused, character focused, to use that to kind of hone in on your pitch. And they asked like a series of questions to help us kind of narrow things down. But I had done a different pitch for each different book in my series, instead of focusing on one book, telling it different ways. And I realized my mistake too late. But even that got me thinking, you know, it's like, I've convoluted this too much. I made things so much more complicated than what they needed to be. And yeah, there's a lot to be said without trying to cram too much all at once. And some people just are better at pitching too. We had one guy in our group, he's just phenomenal, but he had a background in that, in his technical, you know, previous jobs. It was his job to pitch to people. And so he was phenomenal about pitching. And by the time he was done telling about one of the ladies' works, all of us were just laughing, because like, we'll just go out and buy it now. I mean, we're so awesome. I almost forgot what he was pitching because he was so good at pitching. So, you know,
Oh, that's cool.
it was a
But
great lesson.
it was an intimidating exercise, but it was so worth it. And I think that was part of it too. Is like these things that, like Kathy said, she didn't even want to do it, you know, and I found it like scary, but you do it and you face those fears and you do it anyway. And it was just fun because everyone was having fun with it, you know, too. So there was no right or wrong. It just was what it was. And you could learn, like, if the person didn't really tell what you thought they should have told, you know, then that was your fault. I mean, you know, or you just hadn't, like Melissa said, hadn't necessarily given it as the best way you could have. So it was just such a learning experience that way, and kind of just fun, just fun. Thomas also suggested that you write your pitch before you write your book. Not that it's written in stone, but that will give you at least a little bit of a guideline of where you're going. Um, and I will tell you that lots of times, like after I got a little bit more established, And like with the Barber novellas, all they wanted from us was pitches. Like if we were all had already written for Barber, all they wanted was to see like 2 or 3 paragraphs of what each story would be, and that's what they would make their decision on. So it is a really good it's a really good skill to learn how to do that.
That
How
could be a tough one for people that have to write discovery drafts in order to figure out what story they're going to tell.
it
Because
is.
some people, like me, they just don't come up with ideas until they get on a page and they start working out in characters and things show up.
I know, and that does happen. Go, Melissa.
Was going to say that was one of the strengths that I learned that I had that I never really honed on, was that I'm a good high concept person when it comes to thinking of things, that it might not be what you stick with, because I
Right.
am a
Right.
plantser. I'm a plantser, so when I went and first wrote my book proposal, I didn't have the other books in my series, the proposed books in my series written, but I had some idea of where I wanted to go. So I just spitballed a high concept of what was going to happen in the story. And, now that I've been fleshing out other books in the series and I'm going, I realized those high concepts aren't right anymore. I'm going to have to go back and change them. But it gave something for others to get an idea of where you were going. And so they still served a purpose, even if in the end you end up having to rewrite it completely.
Yeah, and that's
I wonder how that it is different for somebody that writes a character-driven book versus an action-driven book. Because if you don't really know your character quite yet, and you have all these other elements that maybe an action-driven person might writing out the action, but all these other elements for a character-driven book are feeding the character change, that can be kind of tricky. I wonder how well you can come up with a concept idea for a character-driven book versus,
I was going to say all mine are character driven, so mine were high concepts for the characters. But I had an idea of where my characters were going and which characters I wanted to fixate on for each book. So again, but then too, there's some of them where I thought I'm going to focus on one character, and then I ended up having another character take over. So
yeah. So again, it's not written in stone, but it gives you a guideline. It gives you a starting place, I think, too, sometimes, if you can just sort of think about it ahead of time. Yeah.
I guess it just shows that I'm not very good at coming up with concepts
Oh, I
before
think you're probably better than you think you are. You just, yeah. I
Well,
think
that's the one thing that I like too. Just because it was suggested doesn't mean it absolutely has to.
exactly. No.
We not too long ago we talked about how smart goals sometimes cause people to cringe in fear, and that was one of the things that was really honed in on in this conference, was establishing some smart goals. But as we were going through a lot of those aspects in the lesson, I realized this could still be applied to somebody who didn't have a hard and fast smart goal, as long as they had a trajectory, something to aim for, that they were consistently moving the needle towards. It could still apply to them. And so I thought, this conference really showed how flexible you can be with all these concepts and still make headway, I guess is the way to put it.
Basically customize them to yourself and what you need.
It really was. That was one of the big strong points of this conference, was learning how to customize everything presented so that you came away with a plan for your books. And I think they nailed it. I think it definitely, they succeeded.
Now, did they mention whether or not they were thinking about doing this again next year?
He's looking into it. Yeah.
Because this was pretty much the initial maiden voyage of this conference.
It was, and I thought that'd be kind of fun to speculate too. I mentioned that earlier. What do you think? Do you think that from what we saw from people there and what we experienced, what the likelihood would be of another novel marketing conference happening next year in 2025? And I think it has a good chance, honestly. From what I saw, what I experienced from others, I think that there are a lot of people who are very stoked about what they experienced. And there's still so much more that they could add to it that could make it new for people who've even gone already and think, I probably learned everything I need to learn. No.
It was an experimental kind of thing, and like purposely kept small, purposely not doing like a lot of edits and ages. I mean, like that, and having everybody, no workshop options. You went, or you attended what was being presented, and that was interesting too. Like Trisha Goyer, who is big in the homeschool market, did a presentation on that. And that was one, it's like, I'm not really interested in that, but I'll sit here anyway. And I was glad I did. I mean, I have no intent at all to try to break into that market. It's huge. It's, she grew up in it sort of with her kids from the get-go. So she started out with just a small booth and now she has this humongous booth, but she's making tons of money and selling tons of books that way. But she talked about the culture of the homeschool market, and it was fascinating. And I was glad I listened to it, even though I'm not interested in pursuing that. And I think that was part of it too. It's like, here are all these different things. You're not expected and should not even attempt to try them all. Do what's going to work for you and for your books and for your audience. Know who your Timothy is. Know why you're writing what you write, and find the marketing that works best for that. Yeah, I don't know if I would go back like next year necessarily, but I would want to go back at some point in the future. I hope they do continue doing them, and I think it'd be a great refresher course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, an opportunity to meet. Kathy, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I just wanted, first I wanted to jump on what you said about the homeschooling
Sure.
market, because I think we learned something about studying cultures.
Yes.
As
Yeah.
you said, it may not be a homeschooling culture that we're going to market to, or it may be, but how well do we know the culture of the people, the Timothy that we want to write for? And I thought that was a very good point that you made there.
Well, thank
Yeah. Yeah. And if I were to go back, it would depend on what they were going to do, because it was a little bit expensive. But I mean, on the other hand, not prohibitively. Our conferences can be much more expensive than that. But I want to see who else is coming. We could have a big reunion, That would be that would be a lot of fun.
That would be fun because, yeah, we all made
Yeah.
new friends, and that was
Yeah.
nice. And I will tell you, even just that, so many people volunteering who had rented cars already, who had their own car.
yeah.
I mean, just so gracious about, well, Melissa dropped me and Kathy's roommate off at the airport, which was so kind. She and Morgan had other plans, and it wasn't too far out of the way, I don't think, but they were so kind to drop us off at the airport. And we were there early. So Kyle was Kathy's roommate. She and I sat at the airport for a couple hours, just,
Oh, that's
getting
great.
to know each other and talking to each other until we
Yeah.
needed to separate to our separate
Yeah.
gates. So there was just a lot of that kind of thing going on too. A lot of just great conversations, a lot of great fun. Melissa, Morgan, and I actually spent one evening in my hotel room with pizza, and that was a delight. I just enjoyed that so much, just getting to know
Yeah.
Melissa in a different way, and Morgan too. She's a fun girl, and just
Yeah.
so confident and poised, and it was just great being with her. And so, you can't, no amount of money is gonna that's worth it all. So,
No.
Yeah.
No.
The friendships were definitely worth their weight in gold. No argument there.
absolutely.
Yeah. For
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting close to the hour, but I want to talk just really quickly about Tracy Higley. She's an award-winning author and is doing a lot of almost all indie. I don't think she started out indie because she's done different
Yeah,
things.
she's hybrid. She has both
Yeah.
traditionally published books and indie, but I think she is starting to lean more towards the indie market because
Done a lot with it,
she and I talked a bit too, and she really thinks that it's the way for her to go. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually had a book of hers on my Kindle. I hadn't started yet, so that was kind of exciting. So anyway, she talked about the joy of writing, and this is something that had been on my mind before we went to the conference. That, like, my word of the year is creative joy, because I want to have that in my writing, and I was sort of beginning to lose it a little bit just from the pressure of too many deadlines. So her last topic, the last keynote, last session, was oh, now I'm on author advertising, I'm on the wrong page, but she was talking about productive joy, the joyful productivity And so I guess I actually had two things I wanted to say. Okay, so let me go back to the author marketing. She did one session on Amazon ads and Facebook ads, and it was so encouraging because she divided people, like she divided where you are into groups. And like right now, I think I'm in the third group, which is I am traditionally published and I have one indie book. I don't have a series. And so it's like Amazon ads are not for me yet. And so it was just like nice to know that. It's like, don't waste my time right now. But then it was like, here's the point where yes, Amazon ads are for me. And so it's like that's where I'm going. That's where I'm heading to get like a series. You need a series. And she also talked about if you do have some indie books published and they're not in a series, they're standalone books, find a way to put them in a series, like maybe by place or something, so that you can have the covers be very, and do the covers so they're very similar. And now you do have a series, even if they are standalone books. So I forget the example that she used. I think I did take a picture of it, but already in my mind, preparing for this conference, preparing for what I want to do as an indie author, if I go more that way, I am placing my stories in Florida, where, many of you know, I lived for a couple decades. I love Florida. And so it's, whether it's historical or contemporary or even series within it, it's Florida fiction. That is the banner. So no matter what, because I like historicals, I like contemporaries, I write them both. That's where they'll be set in Florida. Now that's not true of all the books I plan to write, but it's the most of the books I want to write. So that was just very helpful and very affirming, and also just saying, okay, here's where I need to be. And that's when I start looking at Amazon ads, and that's when I started following her advice. And then she went to the very last session was this joyful productivity. And she talked about Ecclesiastes 12:12 of making many books, there is no end. We all know, we all know that verse, and that the writing life is hard and none of us has all the time to do it all. So we've got to find what brings us joy. And it may be hard because some things don't bring us joy at all and they still have to be done. But if we can use that Venn diagram and thinking joy, marketing, and audience, and find that little where they all overlap, the joy, the marketing, the audience, that's where she encourages us to focus our time. So, I mean, that too was just like, I loved it in my newsletter. I love the feedback I get from my newsletter. I know there are things that my newsletter needs improvement on. That I don't have done, I need to do. And it's like, that's where my time needs to be. That's the best use of my time when it comes to marketing right now. So, final words, Kathy, Melissa.
I'm with you. That was one of the most freeing things that I had as a takeaway, was knowing where I'm at and what I could let off my plate, because I, felt burdened, like I had to know it all.
Yeah.
And I had specifically had even gone up to Thomas and asked him, how many followers do you need to have before you do have to worry about Kickstarters and things like that? And he said, if you're not paying for your newsletter, platform that you're sending it out at, don't even bother with Kickstarters or paid ads or anything like that. You need to work on building your newsletter platform. So that's at least 1,000 followers. So if any of you are not at 1,000 followers, don't worry about Amazon ads. Don't worry about Kickstarters, all that. Work on nurturing your audience. You're free. Go and be at peace. That was just awesome for me. So I knew that, and I kind of had an inkling, but it was good to have the affirmation that my focus now needed to be on nurturing my audience, on providing them quality content that they could trust, that they can come back to again and again, and just building that up so then it grows naturally, organically, I guess is the term. So yeah, I felt at ease. It was like burdens off my shoulders.
Kathy, you're muted. Yeah.
I know. My cleaning ladies are here and Molly's at the door just ready. So I said, you don't need to hear her growl a little bit.
That's okay.
Anyway, I was going to go back to I agree with what you said about joyful productivity. I think that was a great way to close off the conference, to say, don't kill ourselves if it's not bringing joy to us, make sure it's bringing joy. But one thing I was going to throw in, one more practical thing that you guys didn't cover, but I think as authors, it's a tool that we can use, and it's not as hard as it may sound, is to be featured on podcasts. And not to have necessarily, in fact, they didn't necessarily recommend that a writer should host their own podcast, but it does more good to be on other people's podcasts. And that is something that can help build our subscriber list.
Yeah.
And we don't have a huge amount of work to do. He has some great suggestions for some simple tools that you ought to have if you're going to do a good job with podcasting. But that's something, I mean, I've been on a couple of podcasts and I think I'm going to get on more. It isn't that hard to do. And most podcasters are looking for content. So, especially the smaller ones, they're looking for, so that can be another tool that we can use. And certainly that's related to speaking opportunities. You find places where we can speak. That makes a huge difference in our marketing. So anyway, that was just another thought I had.
I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, I'm sorry, Melissa. Because that was another whole session and we had to practice.
Yeah.
And there again, like
Yeah.
we had to like take turns and we recorded it, like interviewing one of our other people. So we had like 20 minutes, I think, that
Yeah.
we had to ask them questions and they had to answer them. We had to be the good host, and then the roles switched. So there was a lot of practical experience there. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say that was a part that really kind of took me by surprise. And I'll admit fully, all on the table, I did not want to do it. I was completely discouraged at that point. I'm like, I don't want to do this exercise. Is there any way I can hide so I don't have to get up and talk? And because we had to have recorders on our phone. Like Johnnie said, we had to play role reversals. One partner would be the guest to the podcast and the other one would be the host. And so we were given a little script that we had to intro them. We had to talk about their book to get them going, and then open it up and engage them in talking about their book, about what their audience is, everything that we were kind of just trying to apply in this conference, and learn how to be the good host and the good guest. And I was just like, I can't do this. I'm not good at this stuff. And I was totally down on myself. And I ended up getting teamed with another lady on her group, Peggy, and she's just awesome. So engaging, so puts you at ease. She was the perfect partner to be with at that time. And I think it was a God ordained thing, honestly. And we just sat there chatting for the first little bit, and all of a sudden she just kind of drops it on me. She's like, okay, I'll be the host first. She pulls up my phone, gets everything going, and just jumps right into it. So I had no time to really think. I just had to go. And it really kind of reminded me that that's one of the strengths, is just to not put too much into it, but just engage with people, to connect and to serve. And yeah, it really was a good lesson at my low point at the conference that applied everything very well, I think.
That's good. All right. Well, I think we're going to do things a little different because it is getting like we've gone an hour. I wasn't sure we would. I said, this might be a short episode. No, God always surprises me. So I think what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and close out the recording and then have everyone pop on, and anything you want to ask, say, we'll just do all that as part of the after party. Brandy, and next week we're having someone talk about romance. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, we have Daniel Kaplan from Autocrit who's going to come and talk to us about putting romance into any genre. And let me tell you, if you just want to be here, because he is such a personable, fun guy. He knows what he's talking about, and he knows romance, and he knows how to put it anywhere. So you definitely want to come join us next Tuesday.
That sounds fun. That's going to be great. Okay. And then for everybody who's here, thank you very much. Thanks, Brandy, Melissa, and Kathy, who I totally put on the spot. She popped in and I said, oh, Kathy, I'm glad you're here. And she so graciously agreed to stay on and add to our conversation.
So glad.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And if you're watching the replay, you know that we invite you every week to join us any Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern. Go around the globe to find your time zone. Isabel, I saw, was here from France. We always love it when Isabel joins us. What else do I want to say? Oh, Facebook group, join our Writers Chat members Facebook group. Check out our Writers Chat Facebook page where you can find all of our videos. They're also available on YouTube, of course, on the Serious writer channel, we have our own playlist there. So you can just see everything that we've done over the last several years. A lot of great information. So until next week, stick around for the after party. Otherwise, we'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye-bye.